Okay guys, so we are looking at speed distance time again. Now I know we did this last year, but as you know we're kind of coming back round to a lot of the topics we did last year and taking it on to the level 4 part. So you're going to need a calculator for this work in particular. Now, speed distance time, we know we've got our formulas. Okay, so if we just get rid of this, and we have the idea that speed is distance divided by time. We have the idea that distance is speed times time, and we have the fact that time is distance over speed. So we're going to be using those three formulas throughout this week's work. And the other thing that you need to remember from before was that when we weren't talking about full hours, so when we were talking about quarter of an hour or 15 minutes, remember that could be written as 0.25 hours. Okay, when we were talking about 30 minutes or half an hour, that was 0.5. And when we were talking about 3/4 of an hour or 45 minutes, that was 0.75. So that helped us do trickier calculations, remember, because all of a sudden, if you had a time like 4 hours and 45 minutes, and you were trying to do a calculation with that, then you knew you could write it as 4.75. So that should all be revision, and we should hopefully remember using that. But what we want to get to this week, guys, is we want to get to the fact, well, yeah, there's three different times, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and 45 minutes, but actually, that's not all the kind of times that we're going to have to use. Not every journey that we do, not everything that we time that we want to work out the speed or the distance that it's travelled, okay, is going to fall into those nice 15-minute intervals. So, what happens if I ask you to work out something using 13 minutes? How are we going to do that if the speed was in 50 miles per hour, say? So miles per hour, remember our time has to be in hours. How are we going to change the 13 minutes into hours? Now, what we're going to have to do to change minutes into hours is we're going to have to divide by 60. And if you want to use an exact time, you would use that fraction 13 over 60. Now, sometimes that fraction will work out nicely. That's what it does for 30 minutes. 30 minutes is really 30 over 60. And we're just simplifying that down until we get a half, which is where the 0.5 comes from. 13 minutes, we're just going to have to leave it as 13 over 60. And you could either use that when you're doing the calculation, or you could get it as a decimal. But when you get it as a decimal, if you type that into the calculator, 13 divided by 60, it's going to give you 0.216666. Now, if you are going to use the decimal, we don't want to round it too much. So I would make that 0.2167. Give yourself plenty of decimal places, okay? But if we are just going to leave it as a fraction, then we could type that into the calculator too. Okay, now, we've got a time, 13 minutes. We've got a speed, 50 miles per hour. So we're going to use that to work out a distance. So distance is speed times time. The speed is 50. The time, now I'm going to do it with the fraction. So I'm going to use the fraction button on my calculator, or type in 50 times 13 divided by 60. Okay, but I'm also going to do it with the decimal, just so you can see the slight difference we might get in the answer. So 50 times 0.2167. So giving myself plenty of decimal places, remember. So in the first one, if I do 50 times 13 over 60, I get 10.83333. And so we would probably call that 10.83. Our speed was in miles per hour, so our distance is going to be in miles. Okay. If I do it with the decimal, now I rounded it to 4 decimal places, so that's still not too bad in terms of accuracy. If I do 50 times 0.2.167, I get 10.835. Okay, so if I was rounding that to 2 decimal places as well, that would give me 10.84. So you can see I get a slightly different answer just because I've rounded it a little bit rather than using the exact fraction. But as long as you're clear with your working as to what you've done, it would be okay. So what's the important parts to write down here? You need to show this conversion, and remember you need your formula, your sum, your answer, and your rounding. I don't just want to see answers here, remember, we need to see the full calculation. So we've looked at two different things there, guys. We've looked at how do I turn something that's in random minutes that doesn't fit our usual pattern into a time that we can work with, a decimal hour, and then how can we use that in a question. Okay, and the work you're going to do initially is just about changing decimal times and getting practice with that, and then you're going to use them in questions. So let's just do a wee bit more of these, changing these decimal times. So I'm going to give you another 3 times at the moment. So we're going to look at, in fact, let's do 4 questions. We're going to look at 18 minutes, and we're going to turn that into decimal hours. We're going to look at 2 hours 36 minutes, and we're going to look at that in decimal hours. Okay, we're going to look at 1 hour 14 minutes. And we're going to turn that into decimal hours that we could use in a calculation. And then we're going to do it slightly differently for the last little one. We're going to say, well, what if we get an answer of 4.7 hours in a question? What would that be in hours and minutes? So how do we go the other way, basically? Okay, so looking at this first one, 18 minutes. 18 minutes, if I want to use that in a calculation, but I need to have it in hours, I'm going to have to do 18 divided by 60. Now, I can leave it like that, 18 divided by 60, and just use it in the calculation like that. 18 divided by 60 will simplify though. It will simplify all the way down to 3 over 10. So you could use 3 over 10. Or if you type in 18 divided by 60 into your calculator to get it as a decimal, you get 0.3 exactly. And that would be something that you could use in a calculation, no problem. So I would probably go with the fact that 18 minutes is 0.3 and use that in my calculation. Okay, 2 hours 36 minutes. Let's ignore the 2 hours just now and just focus on the 36 minutes. So 36 minutes, 36 divided by 60. If we simplify that fraction, we're going to get 3/5. So you could leave it as 3/5, but if we type it into our calculator and get it as a decimal, 36 divided by 60, again it works out quite nicely. We get 0.6, and that's something that we could use in a calculation as well. But remember, that's only the 36 minutes part. We need to deal with the 2 hours as well. So 2 hours 36 minutes is going to be 2.6 hours. So if we were using this time in a speed distance time calculation, 2 hours 36 minutes, we're going to use 2.6 hours. Next one, 1 hour 14 minutes. So again, ignore the 1 hour just now and just focus on the 14 minutes. So 14 minutes, 14 over 60. They both have to give you 7 over 30. It's not going to simplify any more than that. Okay, and if we type it into the calculator, we get 0.23333 and so on, repeater. Okay, so 2 options here. You could leave that as 0.233, and then when you write 1 hour 14 minutes, that's going to be 1.233. That won't be totally accurate, but it's probably going to be good enough for the question that you're doing. Or you could write this as 1 and 7/30ths or 1 and 14/60ths. Okay, so it depends how good your calculator is. If it copes with fractions like that quite well, you might want to keep it exact, or you can leave it as 1.233 and use that for your question. Either of them will work. Okay, now the final thing I just want to speak about is what happens if we do a calculation, we work out a time, so we're using this formula, time equals distance over speed. We've done a distance, maybe say 47 miles divided by a speed of 10 miles per hour. And so we get the time out of 4.7 hours. Now that doesn't mean much to us. The 4 hours bit is fine, but what's 0.7 of an hour? So the 4 hours, we understand, but that 0.7 of an hour, how are we going to turn that into minutes? Oh, excuse me. Okay, how are we going to turn that into minutes? So 0.7 of an hour, how would we turn that into minutes? Well, we've been dividing by 60, so we're going to do the opposite. We're going to times it by 60. Okay, and we get 42 minutes. So if we get an answer out of 4.7 hours, what that means is 4 hours, 42 minutes. So, in this video, guys, I've really just concentrated on this idea of decimal time and how you do that, and that's what you need for the first exercise. After that, you are going to be using it in speed, distance, time calculations. If you're struggling a little bit to remember how to do that, jump on the call or send me a wee message at some stage, and I can do a wee bit of teaching on that, or I can do another video to help you with that.